eighth objective of the 78 policy was to create a passion and discipline in the new generation. We were aware that behaviors of young people were changing and discipline needed to be enforced, and there was no better place to do it than through education. 9 was to promote scientific, professional, and technical education in the country. Again, like the previous policies, the 78 policy also stresses all three types of education: basic general education, professional education, and technical education. All were seen as important as long as children were in schools and colleges. Basics of Islamic education. The foundation of the educational system of Pakistan was based on the Islamic ideology, and that created Muslim nationalism. After all, when the ideology was Islamic, nationalism would have to be in line with it too. And so Muslim nationalism was seen across the country. We were not to look at ourselves as Sindhis or Punjabis or Balochis or Pathans, but we were to look at ourselves as Pakistanis. The nationalism was important. The aim was to mold the character of individuals into the Islamic world so that an exemplary society be created in line with the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith. Because we were an Islamic nation, it was important that whatever we did within the nation be on Islamic principles based on Islamic ideology. Universal primary education. Again, policy after policy we see compulsory education, universal education, free education, but the implementation is not 100%. And so in subsequent policies, the theme resurfaces, and we see it again. The target that the 78 policy set was to open 13,000 primary schools so that by 1992, a good 14 years later really, children of the country could get admission in primary schools. So they recommend universal education. They also give a 14-year period by which 13,000 additional primary schools needed to be established. A long run, no policy really survives for that long. Policies need to be upgraded and changed and modified, and we will see this theme come again in later policies. In addition to those 13,000 schools, 5,000 masjid schools were supposed to be opened as well, so that people because mosques were present in communities and schools were not. So opening primary schools, fine, but opening masjid schools and the mosques was also seen as a step to help reach that target of universal education. A target of opening 1,000 workshop schools was also fixed. So the government really had planned a certain number of different types of schools to be set up. Now, these workshop schools were meant to help people with trade, technicalities, technical education, because simply learning from books or reading from books or listening to teachers was not seen good enough for technical education. It was important that these children receive hands-on practical training also, and so workshop schools were set up. And this would not only teach content, but would also have students explore, experiment, and experience different skills that would help them be successful. Secondary education. With primary education, secondary education was also seen as important. 1,000 middle schools were to be upgraded to secondary schools, and 200 new schools were to be opened. Again, in the 78 policy, we see a focus on quantity, opening a number of schools at different levels. But how are those schools going to be staffed? Where are the teachers coming from? The students may come, but where are the teachers coming from? And all that, you have to look at the whole picture and not just look at fulfilling numbers. Because when we only fulfill numbers, we tend not to meet our targets.